let's go crazy about the other big-time trade on Tuesday. Amari Cooper is a member of the Buffalo Bills. He is going there essentially for a third-round pick. The Browns, those dirty dogs, they somehow got the Bills to give them back a pick swap, a 6th for a 7th on the way in return. So like they actually are the Bills are moving up from the 7th to the 6th round and getting Amari Cooper here. And so I just am when I say those dirty dogs, I mean I can just imagine the trade was essentially done, and they're like, it'll really be done if you give us more than that. And the Browns are just like, God, I guess we really, really don't want Amari Cooper on our team. I think it makes sense for both parties. Amari Cooper in a different situation than Davante Adams because he is in a contract year. So that's an interesting element that on paper it looks like a rental, but once you have him in the building, you have more control. You could always franchise tag him next year. You certainly could re-sign him early. We saw the Bills last night not really get their wide receivers involved too much, certainly on the outside. And Amari Cooper would certainly seem to help out a group that's given some concern for Bills fans. What do you think, Connie?
I mean, I just love the answer from the Bills to the Jets. With first it's Davante Adams, now it's Amari Cooper. And I just wish that I was privy to all of the behind-the-scenes workings, all of the phone calls that were going between the GMs and the agents and the players. But in terms of this addition to Buffalo, I guess everybody doesn't have to eat now because that was their mantra. Everybody eats, spreading the ball around. I mean, Keon Coleman, he's not a number one wide receiver, but he's a great compliment to have. So this is going to add so much, another layer, like Jordan was saying, to the offense in general. But I think it was smart of them because they obviously had a very little cap space. This deal worked perfectly because Cleveland converted the majority of Cooper's $20 million base into a signing bonus. So that was why the Bills were able to afford this. And yeah, Greg, they had to give up that 3rd round pick, but also they still have the pick that they acquired from the Stephon Diggs trade, an extra 2025 second rounder. So they really do win out in this.
Right.
And the contract's less than $1 million. I love this move. This was in part because selfishly, this was going to be a part of my entrance to this segment.
No way.
Yeah, where I thought this could change would be the Bills roster because I felt like they really learned and faced some hard truths about themselves over the last couple of weeks. And I think some of it was figuring out if things could work with that receiver core and how they were going to deploy everybody. But then just saying that it just wasn't going to work. I love when a team is honest with itself, about itself, and then moves to activate those changes and sort of like fix itself, in the I can fix them era of the Bills. And I think that you could see this in the last couple of weeks in these games. Defenses had no fear of their receivers. They were playing man so much against these receivers. Monday night, even the rotational corners on the Jets were in man against this receiver core, over 50% of their coverage snaps. No, there was not a huge sample size because Josh Allen only threw the ball 25 times, but still, there was no fear about this. They weren't threatening defenses. They were having difficulty layering concepts in order to spring each other open in different ways. And so I love this. This opens up so much. Again, it spreads the field a little bit wider. It adds an actual threat that will dictate certain coverages towards a bona fide number one receiver. Once he gets his feet under him, he gets his rhythm. And I also love that the Bills are starting to lean more into an identity that doesn't necessarily have to depend on the passing game. They're loading up in heavier personnel sets. Ray Davis, welcome, Ray Davis, to the freaking NFL. Love to have you here, man. Like, what a brilliant debut from him. I loved watching him at the Senior Bowl this past year. And they are using this north to south running. They're using him in the passing game. They're using 12, 13, 22 personnel, extra tight ends, even a fullback. And they're leaning on this to where they can now make this their identity and still have the multiplicity to pop out in the passing game because they can now actually, with Amari, they can actually rely on this once he gets his feet under.
Right.
That switch to Joe Brady last year midseason was one of the best things that they ever did.
Absolutely. They are a run-first team. Josh Allen running the ball, I've pointed out on the show a number of times, is the most effective play in football on like a statistical basis. Success rate, like when he runs the football, it's always successful, and he helps the running game. They have a great offensive line. I think they could have won the Super Bowl before this trade. I think they have a better chance to win the Super Bowl after this trade. I don't think Amari Cooper is a number one receiver. I don't think he's probably been the prototype of a guy who throughout his career is in that gray area. Yes, he's a top 32 receiver. Is he a top 10 receiver? Almost never, but he's so streaky. He kind of reminds me of the poor man's T.O. in that there's always a honeymoon period.
But when you say number one receiver,
yes.
When I say that, I'm not saying he's going to have the entirety of the target share. I'm saying this is a coverage dictate type of player. That's what I'm saying.
And I don't even know if he was doing that in Cleveland this year. He's looked awful. Like, he's been open, but he just hasn't executed, like, his drops.
Well, the drops are really bad.
The context there is not great.
No, it's not. Yeah. But some of it when you watch, I did want to go watch these two guys as targets, him and Adams, and the contested catches, like uncatchable balls. He's just been out of it. And
after a career year, too.
Right. So that's the thing is he's had a really interesting career. He seems moody. I think now he's not like
Wouldn't you be if you were there?
There were some Instagram stories about when he was coming up in trade conversations. There were some posts about like I'd go there, whatever, that kind of thing. I think that's might be what you're referring to here.
I'm referring to his entire career. His career in Oakland, he was very moody, very streaky, very up and down. When he was into it, until he wasn't into it. And then he got out of it and he went to Dallas and he immediately started playing better. He immediately started being more focused. Everything was awesome. And then after a little while in Dallas, a few years, he was very much not into it. And he was almost not unplayable at points in his last year in Dallas, but he was not into it, and they were sick of him, and they got rid of it, and then he gets to Cleveland, and he's back into it. It's awesome. It's honeymoon. It's working. And then this season, it was again kind of the Amari Cooper isn't happy season. So you would think they get the honeymoon.
We're talking about the Bills. They know how to capitalize on a dang honeymoon period.
Yeah. I mean, jackpot.
They have precedent with this.
Yes.
I mean, that's what I think. We're talking about this contextually of what they believe their ceiling is, and that is Super Bowl. So yeah, they're making this move, and they're probably depending on the honeymoon.
Hell, they even had a nice honeymoon period with T.O. back in the day. Now, that was really old T.O., by the way, if I'm just connecting it. But people forget how freaking good T.O. was.
Oh, my
God.
That
when he was 36 and 37 in Buffalo and Cincinnati for those 1 year, it was like he was still sneaky, kind of awesome.
I just remember how good he was on Jerry Rice Day.
Yes. Yes. And like Philadelphia was a perfect. So to me, he seems like the more low-key, maybe passive-aggressive T.O. Amari Cooper. But I'll say that all to the point that I think it'll work out.
T.O. was very passive-aggressive.
Yeah, he was just aggressive occasionally, but yes.
I love how you're existing in multiple time zones at one time as you're sitting there still connecting these dots. Like, that's incredible.
Really impressive.
Now, if we trust next-gen stats, average separation as a meaningful stat, which I'm not
Do you not trust it? What's happening
That stat, I'm not sure. I think it really is dependent on scheme, team, season. There's a lot that I think goes into it. But for what it's worth, Amari Cooper average separation this year is higher than it's been since 2018. Just throwing that out.
Well, he certainly separated from the Browns.
There you go. $22 million in dead money on the Browns' books for next year for Amari Cooper. So everyone who's saying, hey, they did a great job. They gave up a fifth for Amari Cooper. You got so much value out of him. Absolutely true. Like the analytical way to look at this was they did a great job with this quote unquote asset, and they got a third round pick back here, and that's solid. But they still do have Deshaun Watson and Amari Cooper on the books next year for $100 million, and I don't think either of them are going to be helping that team. So that's like, from a Browns perspective, it did make me think, where are they're in a weird spot right now. They're 1-5. Are they gonna go into full tank mode? If you were going into full tank mode, is that a reason to keep playing Deshaun Watson? I'm just saying, like, would you not want Jameis Winston to go in there and get wins?
I would love to
dark,
see Jameis Winston.
And it's craven, and it's, like, calculated, and it's cynical. Like, if they would make Deshaun Watson keep playing in order to lose. But this is the team that ignored everything about Deshaun Watson to sign Deshaun Watson. So I don't know. I wouldn't put anything past this organization.
Two more very quick points I want to make on the Bills, too. Still, one of the biggest concerns I have with them is something that's popped up all year. And I love that they made this move, even though it quietly wasn't necessarily their biggest need, which was getting some defensive backs back healthy. Teron Johnson really settled in and made that huge play Monday night at the end of the game. But then also they allowed 15 non-penalty plays of 10 plus yards. A lot of that is struggling to tackle in the defensive backfield. A lot of that is just these holes that are happening against this Bobby Babich, Sean McDermott defense. And so, but what I love on the counter, what I love about this team is that they were like, all right, well, we're just going to not play close games anymore. We're going to try to do whatever we can to lean into this identity with and be a running team with multiplicity, but also find a player, go out and get a player, not necessarily one of our larger needs, but a player who we know is going to shift coverage after we've faced this difficult reality about our current receiver core. We're just not going to play close games anymore. Solves a lot of problems at once because they can play ball control with their run game. They also won't necessarily need to depend on their kicker as much.
They need to get a new kicker. Tyler Bass has been missing kicks for a while. He's had a nice run in Buffalo, but sometimes the run is just over. It's interesting. You don't think it's one of their bigger needs. I love this Bills
I
team.
do think it was one of their bigger needs. I'm just saying my greater concern watching this defense can just be overly porous at times.
In the back seven especially.
Keep other teams in games. I do think, like I said at the very top of this, I do think facing that truth about how teams were playing their receiver, going out and getting a coverage dictation guy, that was really crucial.
They are the number 3 offense, according to DVOA, after 6 weeks. So it's not like they've been struggling offensively, but I think the highs of the first 3 weeks, they
The
were
Bills
going
are
away.
something that will change.
They will change, and Amari
For the
Cooper,
better.
Amari Cooper is going to help them out a lot. It all makes a little more sense. Shakir and Kincaid as a 2 and a 3, and then
Perfect.
the other receivers now just kind of helping out as role players. Keon Coleman, a little less Matt Collins. That play by Matt Collins might have been just like the Mike Williams play was like the one you remember. That play by Mike Collins where he didn't flatten out and couldn't get the touchdown. It was like, okay, we need to bring in Amari Cooper. And it was a great response because I don't think there's any wide receivers else available. That might have been why they responded so quickly. It was like Devontae and Cooper. I went and tried to look to come up with who could be available at wide
Who's out
receiver.
there?
Christian Kirk, maybe.
Uh-huh.
He's due a lot of money, but Christian Kirk, maybe Tyreek Hill in a different world where things get wild.
So yeah,
He doesn't think so.
He likes Miami.
Deontay Johnson, the Panthers say they're not going to trade Deontay Johnson and they want to sign him long term, which makes sense to me, but he could be someone. Not many people available.